Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics, back with the Noel sampler. So long. Hopefully you enjoyed making your N. Now it's time to work on our letter O. I've done that ahead of time. Let me show you what that looks like. It's so beautiful. Isn't that so pretty? Let me point out some of the highlights and then I'll go ahead and move that off to the side. Really, starting on the left side of our letter, we'll have our panel. We'll talk about how to fussy cut our angel panel. We just have two pieces of fabric we'll be sewing together there, and we'll put our fabric, our square in the corner, draw our lines, sew and flip, and we'll sew our blue fabric with the houses on that and the Christmas trees to the bottom. Again, sew and flip. Really, we're kind of doing the same thing over here. We'll go over, talk about fussy cutting that panel and any of the nuances of that. And again, sewing just a little bit of fabric to the top, fabric in the corners. Where a lot of the focus is going to be is in this center column here. We'll talk about our piecing. We've got some really fun techniques with that. And then we'll go into the wreath. I want to right away point out something about the wreath. And this is something where you're going to have to make a decision. We worked diligently to make sure that our letters were all where they were readable, right side up, and not mixing and matching. If that's important to you, you'll want to pay close attention to the instruction that I'm giving you, and hopefully I'll nail it, but if I don't, we'll seam rip and we'll do it again until our words are going the right direction. If you don't, doesn't matter to you whether the words are going upside down, left and right, no worries, just piece that together the easiest way you find possible. All we're looking for is accurate results, right? So let's dive right in to our panel. By the way, I know more of you have been asking a lot about the Better Not Pout Ornament Club. That is with the book. So, by the way, when you're in that club, you'll automatically get the book, which includes so many other projects. We'll be coming out with kits for many of the things that you see in the book. As a reminder, all of the things associated with the Better Not Pout Ornament Club are pre-cut for you to the exact size. No cutting and tracing required, and of course, laser cut as always, prefuse and laser cut, which I love, so you can just peel the paper, iron it down, and go, and all the buttons are included. We still have space, and we will eventually be offering the ornaments for sale individually. So just wanted to mention that. We do get questions about that as well. We're going to dive in. Our goal is to try to give you as much information as we can so you can be successful. Steps that we may have done in the first video, I'll try to expedite that so we don't have as much airtime. We don't want to completely exhaust you watching these videos. We know that you know how to sew two strips together, but it's with these blocks is where I'm really going to take the time and drill into that so that you know how to get your blocks as precise as possible to have the best results. So let's go ahead. I'm going to put this off to the side. So we're just focusing right now on the angel panel, and you'll want to go ahead and get out your sheet that we've included in your kit. You'll be referencing that. It's a lot easier than the cover of the pattern just because you're getting a closer up view. And let's get out those instructions. You know what, before I put that aside, I know what I was going to show you. Let me grab my glasses. Notice how it's easier to show you on this. Notice how these points are, nothing's getting clipped, and the same here. So right away, what that tells us when we look at our panel, and our instructions tell us that we want to center the block in the width measurement and start the length measurement a 1/4 inch above the flying geese. That's what we're talking about. Not this whole flying geese section, but the actual flying geese. You want to be a 1/4 inch away from that above. And so we don't clip off that point of this light blue, we want to be a 1/4 inch over here. So our two reference points are right there and a 1/4 inch above. So that's going to be our focus. And let's turn that around. It's a little bit easier. At least I've found it easier for me. Again, add sizing to those panels. Give them a good press. I can see I need to press mine out. I will try to try to make sure I'm showing you all the good habits here. And I've already added sizing to mine, so I don't need to do that again. All right. So we know we're going to use our 8.5 inch ruler. We love that 8.5 by 15.5. Really, the 8.5, I don't need to cut the 15.5 yet, right? I can go ahead and cut right off, and then I'll come back just like we did before, and we'll be very precise about cutting that 15.5. So we know our reference points. We have our nice 1/4 inch dash line here that I'm going to make sure is a 1/4 inch away from the tip of that blue flying geese, and I'm a 1/4 inch above here. So I've got that 1/4 inch guidance and this 1/4 inch guidance. And if I need to scoot anything, remember how we do that. You might want to hang on to that ruler because we gotta have that 1/4 inch. And we know we need that 1/4 inch right there. And don't be afraid to push and pull your fabric, within reason of course, to get what you need to get. 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. This is one of the things that we noticed with the first panel, and it happens for all 4 of the letters, is you need to take that time to fussy cut your panel exactly where you want it to be. And as I said, if I could walk around this table and never move that panel, that is your preferred. So if you can find a space to accomplish that, so you're not having to realign, that is ideal. All right, let's put this aside just for the moment. Now we know we need to go ahead. I'm just going to grab a little bit of a smaller ruler, and I need to cut a 1/4 inch above my flying geese strip. Notice I push and pull the fabric just a little to get it where I need it to be. All right, now we'll come back, measure our 15.5, and I love this ruler for that reason. I can just lay it on my 15.5, and I know I'm where I need to be. I've already got threads on me. That's how you know you're a quilter, right? If you're like me, you just keep a lint roller in your sewing room. Okay, our panel is done. Now, just so that we can try to streamline our time together, if you look at this one, I'll just do this first little section here. What we have, it's always very challenging with so many things on here. We have these 2 pieces that I can see up there. I see that. I also see I'm already going to use one of these in the corner. And I can see this piece is going to be down here as well in the bottom. And I have another corner that I'm going to use. Okay. That's pretty straightforward. That's not too different than what we did before, where you're going to be sewing certain things together. So in this instance, these 2 pieces, I always recommend, rather than sewing this to the top of that and then this to the top of that, sew these 2 together first. go ahead and do that. I'm going to put a quick pin in there and sew that. I always like to sew smaller sections together first and then sew it to the larger section. Now at the bottom of that, and now you can see why it was very important that you follow that cutting guide so that you make sure that those houses are going the proper direction. So make sure that yep, that's the direction of my houses. Right sides together. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We can go do those right now. You've seen me sew this. Nothing mysterious about this. Now, if we look at the back here, you can see, you can see that in this instance, I pressed up, but you can see that if I would have pressed down, it would not have made a difference. Same story here. It looks like I kind of pressed away from my panel. So that worked, so we'll do that again. We talked about that before, right? Sometimes the pressing does matter, and other times, it's your preference. So this seemed to be one of those instances where it was really my preference, and it's just kind of what I ended up doing. Let's see, we did this like that, and we pressed up on that one. Okay, now another pointer here. Whenever we have a smaller piece, we tend to just put that on top and want to go. But remember, we want to make sure we're not clipping any of those points. So we're going to sew on this side. I am now using this as my guide to sew along there so that I have those points hitting exactly where I want them to hit. And I can see them all along, and they are never out of my sight, which I like. So we're going to sew from this side. One more pin. We don't want that to dive in there. All right. My sight picture is here. Okay, let's see where we are here with this. All right, and we'll just press away again. Okay, we're ready to go on that panel. I had grabbed these squares out because I was thinking, well, I'll square up that corner. Don't do that. Let's put those right back over there. We really need to assemble the 3 sections first, and then we'll put our 4 corners on. So I got excited about putting that on because, of course, that's what makes our O, right? Clipping those corners, and that creates that. But you can see you need to have the seam of those first before you put those corners on. So that's not an option for us. All right, that section for now is done. So I want to put that aside. I'm going to jump ahead to the other side of our our thirds, because we know that's an easy piece. We just did that. We're going to cut the panel here. I want to point out something to you on this one. Let's roll this back so you're only looking at this right now. And what our instructions tell us is to cut 1 ornament block from your panel, 8.5 by 15. Again, we'll center the block in the width measurement and start the length measurement 1/4 inch above the peppermint blocks. This is where I almost cut my panel wrong. So what I was thinking is, that's my peppermint block, and 1/4 inch would be basically that line right there, which means once it's sewn in, it would go right to the peppermints. Don't do that. The peppermint block is this whole section here. So we're going to go 1/4 inch above that and onto the stripe. So that was something that I nearly did wrong. So definitely be careful about that. Okay, so let's get that cut. That's an easy one again. We're going to fussy cut our panel. We sew a little strip on the bottom. We sew a larger square up above, and we will put that off to the side. So I just want to go to the fussy cutting with you, and I will sew that part off camera. Nothing huge with that there. I went ahead and pressed away from my panel again. If you're looking for the pressing instructions on that. But let's turn that around real quick. We know that we're going to be 1/4 inch above this line and onto our stripe. Let's bring out that awesome ruler that just shines in a panel that's got to be cut 8.5 wide. So I've got my 1/4 inch here, and I've got, of course, my peppermints out here. I again want to just kind of bracket that so that I'm ideally running right along here and 1/4 inch above here. So let's see if we can accomplish that. I'll just do my dashed 1/4 inch line right along there, but we know that we have to nail that 1/4 inch above our peppermint line. So I've got that here. Try to get my hair out of the way. We've got 1/4 inch running this way. Let's see, where are we on this one? This one's just a little bit. Let's see what we need to do on that. We might need to stretch this one out just a touch. These panels, you know, you can really kind of stretch them this way, stretch them this way. You can really kind of finesse these to be where you need them to be within reason. So let's try that again. I'm lining up my 1/4 inch. That's king first for me. Then let's slide this over because I want that track right along and be 1/4 inch away from my peppermints. And it looks like my 1/4 inch, let's just stretch that just a touch. A 1/4 inch. So really now as much as I want to be 1/4 inch away from that line of my peppermint, what I want more than anything else is the equal distance. So if I can only have less than 1/4 here, I want less than 1/4 on this side. So that's some pointers for you as well on that. You can kind of just scoot that if you need to. Okay, let's go. Let's cut that. I'm always nervous when I say that. I'm always like, but I double check one more time. Again, if you're in a spot where you can run around that table and cut on the other side, that's so ideal. That's your perfect situation if you have it. Okay, let's go to a smaller ruler, just a little easier on the table for our 1/4 inch above our peppermint row. And I'm going to double check 15.5 inches in length. Let's find our 15.5 with our black dots. Of course, our white dots on our creative grid, any creative grid ruler, are whole numbers. Black numbers are always half increments. And I appreciate that I don't have to find that. I don't have to search between the 14 and the 15. I can just go to that 15 and a half. Okay, and we'll put this panel aside for later. Super cute with the puppy and the kitten. Really fun. I definitely recommend you kind of cut your panels as you go versus trying to cut them out or think you know where that cut line is, because as you can see, it's not intuitive that that's what that panel would look like going into your project. So cut them as you go. As I said, on this side, you know, now you're going to get your big teal holly print, and that will go above. And what do we have down here was the green. It's very straightforward. I'll quickly sew that off camera so we're ready to go, but right sides together. And as I show here, I just pressed away from my panel. As a reminder, when we sew this on here, don't sew from this side, because we want to be able to see that line. That's the king right there. We want to be able to track right along that. All right, so when I come back, those will be sewn together off to the side, and now we dive into that middle row. That's where we'll be spending the rest of our time, or I should say the bulk of our time, with some precision piecing, and I'll show you some really cool techniques that they've included in the pattern. So this is what that third section over looks like. Let's put that aside for now. And we're going to dive right into that middle row. That's where all that precise piecing comes in. And we get to do a really cool technique to build the pinwheel star block. So let's look at that real quick. We'll just focus on this part. So right away we'll get two fabrics. We'll get our P, and I believe that's the N. And we'll use these two fabrics right side together, and we'll create our 8 half square triangles. Down in here, we'll grab our 2 pieces here, and we'll do it, and we'll repeat that step twice, and we'll get to that once. I'm jumping ahead just a touch, because I want you to know what's coming up. We'll build our pinwheel, and then we'll be able to add our sections in, and we'll be able to build this beautiful star block. This is a really neat technique. I had not done this before until we jumped into this pattern, so I'm excited to show that to you. So right away, they say with the coral mistletoe, we will draw a line. Now you could use your seam guide, your 9-inch seam guide for that, but let's just go ahead and follow the instructions as written. So if you don't have the seam guide, you'll know how to do this, and I'll explain to you. If you do have the seam guide, this is kind of the way we learned it old school, right? Is just corner to corner, and then sewing on either side of that line. Of course, if you've got your seam guide, instead of doing that, those lines wouldn't be there. You'll just lay that corner to corner, draw on either side, switch, corner to corner, draw on either side. But I want it to match right now the sight picture of what's in the pattern, so I don't want to confuse you with that. Notice there's another measurement here, over 2 7/8 inch. Now if you do anything with half square triangles, you know you're used to that 7/8 inch measurement. If you want a 3-inch finished half square triangle, you start with 3 7/8 inch squares. This is why Creative Grid created the simple 7/8 ruler. Now I didn't put this in your ruler pack because this is more of what I call a mission specific ruler. You'd need to be working with 7/8 of something to make this ruler be useful to you. And I wanted to keep your ruler set down to rulers that you're going to use again and again and again. But I still want to introduce you to this so that if you're interested in that, you know how to use this ruler. Before I dive into that one, if you have the standard 6.5 by 12.5 inch, no problem. We're just measuring over 2 7/8, and of course that line is going to bisect that and we would just draw straight down and do the same thing horizontally. But of course I need to find that 2 7/8. The beauty of the simple 7/8 is it's right there. I just lay my ruler down there and bam, it's there. I don't have to seek that out on my ruler, and we'll go ahead and just draw that line. They just wrote little tick marks on there. Go ahead and draw the line all the way. I'm more comfortable with a long straight line than 2 little tick marks at the top and the bottom. 2 7/8. Let me get over there. And let's draw that line. Okay. What we will be doing, that line didn't draw too strong, did it? I think I mentioned this last video, is I have used this friction pen so many times that I just need to put the replacement in there, the replacement ink there. Okay. Right sides together. What we are going to be doing is, as shown, sewing a 1/4 inch away from our 2 diagonal drawn lines. If this line being drawn that full is distracting to you, then just draw the tick just a little bit, just as they've shown. It doesn't bother me, and I know I'm only going to be sewing on the diagonals. So let's go ahead and do that. I want to sew kind of more on the scant side, because what's going to happen is we're going to square these up to be 2 1/2, and I want to have something to square up. I don't want to be short of that, or that block is not going to come out as precise as I would like. So what that means is, when I'm sewing here, I'm just kind of on that scant side. So we talked a little bit about the scant last video, and it's continuing to serve me well as I, especially as I'm working into these more precise blocks. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with that. Actually, I'm going to pin over here. I don't want that to move. I don't want any of this to move. I'm going to do a better job of pinning. I think I said it last video, I only have quilt blocks that I regret that I didn't pin enough. I've never once thought, gosh, why did I do all that pinning? I'm like, oh, why didn't I pin? That's the thought. That's the regret. We don't need that. Okay, now let's go. On this point right here, it's a more likely spot that your fabric might dive into that. If you want to have a starter strip, basically it's a scrap of fabric that you start sewing on and then sew right onto that. But let's see if we can get going here. So basically my presser foot is just, that bridge is just a little bit past this line, which helps me sew on the scant side. Okay, so here we have that ready to go. Let me trim off some threads. Got those going everywhere. Now, as you can see, we'll be cutting our diagonals as well as straight up and then across. So any straight ruler, any straight line will do the trick. You can just grab that. On this one, I found it handy to press toward the red sweater fabric. So let me get my iron heating up here as I'm cutting these apart. Now, if I had a spinning mat, oh, I love my spinning mat, then I would be able to kind of keep this thing intact while I cut it apart, but this works. And you can see having that whole line drawn from top to bottom versus just a tick really helps me be more accurate. I want as much information as I can to increase my accuracy. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. What did I wrote? I see I wrote myself a note. I'm going to correct myself on this. It says only half should be pressed toward the coral and press the other half toward the sweater fabric. So I must have made a note to myself while I was making this. So let's do that. Let's split that up. Half will go here and half will go here. And I think that helped me get some interlocking seams. So let's go ahead. We'll make this group press toward the red sweater fabric. We'll see how that lays out. It's funny how when I'm doing video prep and I write myself notes, sometimes I get on camera, I'm like, what was that note for again? So we'll see. Hey, if that does not work out, the great news before you start sewing anything in is you just press things in the opposite direction if it's not what you want. Of course, once it's sewn in, you're kind of locked in unless you seam rip. So you always have the ability to change the direction of how a seam is pressed if you're finding out you don't have the interlocking seams that you're looking for. Okay, that half is toward the red. Let's do this half toward the pink. And anytime I do something like changing that pressing of the seams, it's only to help the block lay a little bit flatter. I definitely have some of my earlier quilts where I did not realize the importance of pressing and the direction to be pressing seams. And I kind of have these hills and valleys in my quilts. Okay, now we talked about squaring these up, and that's what I'll be grabbing for my 2.5 by 6.5 inch ruler. You might ask me, why are you not just using a 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch square ruler? And that's just really for my safety. I could certainly do that, but I don't have a lot of space to put my fingers when I have such a small ruler. So I definitely like to have just a little bit more to hang on to here. And I will go ahead, I'll just start squaring those up. I'm going to do that. We'll zip through that so we can jump right into the very important part. This is just good squaring up, nothing new here. Okay, I have everything squared up to 2.5, and I went ahead and started laying things out on my board, and I want to show you how I did that. Remember how I said half of those were pressed toward the pink, half of those were pressed toward the red. So I just said, okay, let's pick the one on the front left and go press toward the pink. That would mean the one on this side is pressed toward the red. So we're just trying to recreate this sight picture right here, right now. So we've done that. And what you're going to see if you put one here that's pressed toward the pink and one here that's pressed toward the red is once we get ready to sew everything together, this is where you're going to have that beautiful interlocking seam. That's why we did that. So as you lay out, you can just put this on a mat like this and just rotate that. This is always going to be the one pressing toward the pink. This is always going to be the one pressing toward the red. This is how I build blocks. I kind of start putting the pieces down, making sure I've got my orientation correct. That's just my habit. You could use a board like this, or if you have an extra wool mat, or kind of put that off to the side. All right, the next part is we'll grab our Christmas carols in the cream and our red sweater fabric again, and they're showing us drawing the line. I'll go ahead and do that since we did that on the other one, or you could be using your 9-inch seam guide again, corner to corner, drawing on the other side of the line, sewing on that line. But again, if you don't have that seam guide, I'll show you how we'll do that the way we all learned before all these fancy tools were ever invented. Right sides together. I'm just going to put a pin. I want a little bit of a safety net. And again, as we go along, trying to achieve the 1/4 inch away from that line, looking for a scant quarter, I will, in my particular, I'm sewing with a 57D, I believe I do have that on there. Kind of that fence is more over on this, so I'm kind of on, that's how I'm achieving that scant. So I wanted to point that out to you. Okay, so let's do that. Now, just like before, we'll go ahead and cut that apart and square that up. Now, pressing on this one, what I found on this is to go ahead and press toward the red sweater fabric. And you'll repeat this with a second set. You'll have 2 of the cream and 2 of the red, and I've done that ahead of time. So you can see I've pressed toward the sweater. I'm going to do that again. We'll just work off to the side of our mat here. And square that up. Okay, let's clean up just a touch. Always something I have to just keep cleaning up. Okay, we have everything pressed toward our red sweater fabric. Let's go ahead and start laying that out. Our block is coming together. I love that. It's always fun to see it actually start to happen. Oh, there we go. And then our other M squares, 2.5, will come in the corner just like that. And I love that, you know, my wool pressing mat kind of acts as almost a second kind of layout mat, which I love, and I can just bring that right over to the sewing machine. And as you would expect, you know, you'll be right sides together all the way down here. Let's make sure we've got everything laid out properly. Right side together. And pin if you feel you need to go ahead and do that. On this block, once this phase begins, I start pressing everything open. So I am just going to, you know, again, we have a lot of territory still to come with the wreath blocks. I don't want to take up too much time. This isn't difficult. It's precise piecing, 1/4 inch seam allowance, 1/4 inch seam allowance, pressing our seams open. You'll have those 2 columns. Joining those together, again, pinning very carefully, and sewing those together as well. Let me get these all just in a row. I'm going to sew that. I'm going to go through as much of that off camera as I can, so I'm only showing you the parts that could be potentially confusing. But this is very straightforward. So we'll get I'll get this block put together, and if there's anything where I want to come back and make a point of that, I will. Otherwise, you're going to see this block here together in short order. I'll be back. I mentioned before I went off camera I'd sew it all together, but there is something that I ran across that I want to point out. We've got the two little sections of that sewn together in each of these. You can see that here. I recommend you definitely keep laying it out to make sure everything is going together as planned. Here, when we sew this together here, left to right, where we get that interlocking seam, go ahead and feel that lock. I can feel that. And run your pin right along there so that lock does not come undone and everything stays nicely aligned for you. And we'll continue here. In this one, I can either start here or I can start down here, and I'm going to start here. I want to lock in that center. That's very important that that comes out precise, because the center of any pinwheel is where you always see the quality of the precision of the piecing. So again, here, look how they lock in so nicely. And then lastly, here, those are locking in beautifully there as well. Okay, so I will go ahead and sew my 1/4 inch seam allowances, pressing those open. And then I've got the 4 rows. Then you're just going ahead, the top row and the second row, and pinning it every single intersection. That is what is going to make all of these points work. So I think I'll go ahead and sew this, press that open. I just want to touch on that again, if that's still a little foreign to you, why that's so important. So I don't want to leave any step unturned. I know this does make the video longer, and if you already know how to sew this block together, just zoom past that and we will be moving on to the other portion of our block, which is the wreath portion. So I have the block like this now in my kind of my rows. When I first started quilting, I'm like, okay, right sides together, just started pinning all the way across, and where the points landed, the points landed. Those quilts embarrassed me because my points were hit and miss. I've since learned that I've got to roll that fabric back. I'm going to show that from the overhead camera. And I'm going to put a pin right down that seam. You can even, if you want to, pivot that back up right along there and come back up through the top layer. You can get as precise as you want. The point is, we are going to make sure that those are lined up, and we're going to be putting a pin in each one of those first. So if you have the habit of just pinning left to right, change that habit. It'll increase your accuracy. You'll be much happier with the results, and you're going to be doing a lot of less seam ripping. So I pin my spots first. Then I'll go back in the very beginning if I'd like to, and put a pin in there, that's fine, and one over here as well. Now you will repeat the same steps, of course, with the bottom rows, being very careful, pressing seams open, and then joining the rows and pressing seams open. I know that in the pattern, they're having you, the first and the third row are pressing all the seams to the right, and the second and fourth, all the seams to the left. But the reason I like these seams being pressed open is as I begin to sew this 1/4 inch seam allowance, I can see that point right there that I want to hit. It's helpful. If that seam was rolled to the side, I can't see that anymore. I want to be able to have as many visual cues as I can. Now if I sew it from this side, which I certainly could, it doesn't really matter. I have that point to hit and that point to hit. So maybe there's a reason to be sewing it together on this side. You have twice as many chances to hit that 1/4 inch seam, and you've got where that V is, that's exactly where the 1/4 inch seam is. So just, you know, you can take that and run with that and try that, or follow the instructions and press the seams in the direction of the pattern. Totally your preference. When I come back, I truly mean it, this block will be ready to go and done. And of course we can see that we're sewing just a strip along the side of that. Hey, I'll go ahead and get that done as well off camera so that we can move right on to our wreath block. I'll be back with this block finished up, and the gold strip will be sewn on the left side of that. So this part is all done. We have our block assembled with the gold on the side. Let's put that aside. We're going to move straight on to the wreath now. And the wreath block, they tell us that there are 3 flying geese blocks in the wreath, so I'll point those out. This is a flying geese block. This is one, and then there's another right in here. Okay, so that's significant to us. To make the flying geese block, draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of the R and S blocks. This is again where if you want to have all of the words going the same direction, follow these instructions. Let's go ahead and get out our piece W. And the easiest way for me to explain this to you is you kind of test it. Now, I know that this is a great opportunity to use the corner clipper. However, I would actually discourage you from doing that at this point, because we want to be able to check our work, make sure the words are going the direction that we want before we go ahead and start trimming any fabric away. And of course, with the corner clipper, as you saw in the previous video, you cut that clean away and then sew on your line. So what am I talking about here? Let's grab out our fabric. The instructions are showing the W going this way. So what I'm going to do to acclimate is I'm going to turn this way, okay? So that I am looking the same orientation as my instructions. So my S is my, with the words, and my R is my kind of lime green, I would say. So I'm going to put that over here. I might even just keep that kind of with me to remind me. All right. So in order to achieve this, I want you to test this. And what you want to do is, we know we're going to put this on as shown, draw the line and sew on the line and flip it back. Notice how this is not this. I need to orient that so that my words, that's not it, right? So you just keep turning it. And you're like, well, those are going the other direction, so let me turn that 180 degrees. I want to show you all of the possibilities of what you might see. This is what you want to see. Notice the words are going up and down, because when we turn this to be straight on, our words will be reading properly to us. So I'm going to go ahead now, without moving that thing, and I'm going to go ahead and sew on that line. Now, if you are comfortable and confident you've made the right choice, and I am confident that I've done that because I've checked it. If you are inclined to use your corner clipper, at this point, you would go ahead and cut right here. In fact, we'll go ahead and do that. We're going to live a little on the edge here, right? Let's go ahead and do that. I want you to know that you can make that decision. Once you've verified things are going in the right direction, we'll go ahead and make that cut. Let's put a little pin in that. Oh, I bumped that just a touch. Now, obviously you wouldn't have that drawn line, but it never hurts to draw the line to confirm what is it that we're trying to get accomplished. press to the outside. Now, of course, with the green holly, we don't need to worry. The lime green holly, that's not directional. There's no words. So we can go ahead with confidence, lay that in that corner, draw the line if you want to draw the line. If you've got the corner clipper, we know that we're cutting what's out here. We can lay that on there. Okay, let's press to the outside. And that is beautiful. So we know right now we have this part. All right, next part. Let's switch it. Now we're going to do the one over on this side. This is the again, where we're going to say, okay, we know that once this is turned out, that's not right. And I'm looking, where I'm looking right now is right there. That's what I'm looking at. How do we get there? Is that correct? Yes. So it doesn't, you can always, doesn't matter whether you sew the left side on first or the right side. It doesn't really matter. Why don't we go ahead, just because that's a stressful side for us. We know this is the side, right, that is going to be cut away. So if you're comfortable, go ahead and use the corner clipper. If you're not, just get a straight edge, line to line. Go ahead and sew and flip, double check, and if you're comfortable, you're like, yep, that's correct, go ahead and trim. I am confident. We have been very careful about checking. I will use my corner clipper because I love that. It's this side that's going to be trimmed away. Hopefully my head's out of the way. Of course, I need to always be over top of my shape. You know, when you look at a quilt, you're a quilter, you know, you're watching this, you're obviously a quilter. And I think it takes another quilter to appreciate quilting, because just like this, a person who doesn't know what effort it takes to get all the words going in the same direction is like, oh, that's nice. But a quilter goes, wow, I recognize that's a lot of effort. So, you know, just know that that extra effort you're taking, if you have any quilting friends, will absolutely notice the extra effort it took to accomplish it. Okay, I know that this is the part, again, if you need to draw that line, that's the part that's going to be cut away. So sometimes I can get turned around with my corner clipper. I'm like, what side do I put it on? It's the side to the right. That's my diagonal to my diagonal. I'm going to trim that away. Let's go put a pin and go sew that, and then we're going to be done with that portion of at least making those 2 flying geese blocks. Sometimes when I quickly draw that line, it's just for me to orient myself. Certainly not needed. And most of the time I don't have to draw that line, but every now and again I'm like, am I cutting on the right side of this thing? Certainly don't want to mess that up. All right, let's look at what we have here. So we have our halves like that. And you know what? We can go ahead and join those up. And you can see, look at how that, it's just got to be just so. Let's go ahead and pin that. I just want to see it. I want to see those points come together. I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself, but you know, there's no harm in, because realistically, you're going to sew this together, make the bottom flying geese, which we'll do, and sew that together, and then you're going to be sewing the sides and then the bottom on. So it doesn't really matter whether you prepare these sides and do all of that and then start sewing it together, or sewing it as you go. It doesn't really matter with this particular block. Now, anytime I have that kind of bulk, I'm going to press that open for sure and try to evenly distribute that. So let's set that seam for sure. Now that's beautiful. Our points came together very nicely on that, and we'll put that aside, and our direction of our words are all going the same way. Let's talk about that bottom flying geese real quick. Same story. It's just a sensitivity to setting this thing up so that, how are we doing this one? Yes, like that. So you can see this has got to be like that. So I'm going to quickly just draw that line. It just tells me, because I kind of have to flip this thing, right? So this, just to reiterate, the words are going this direction, but I need to flip this 180 to use my corner clipper, because it's this side that's going to get cut away. So let's go ahead and rotate that. That's why I sometimes draw the line so I don't get mixed up. I have definitely done that before. Okay. And of course the same on the other side. Now you're dealing with some bias, so I better not get too carried away here. Now it looks upside down, but remember that this is going to be turned 180 degrees. So we're good to go. But this next one, we need to have the words again. Once it's folded back like that, so you can see that's the right direction. And this is the side that's going to get trimmed away. If you need to draw the line, if you need to go ahead and do that. Don't feel bad about that. Better right than wrong. Go ahead and put that on there. And let's trim that away. And we'll soon have our third flying geese block done. Okay, very happy with our words. They're all going the right way. Okay, so we know that goes right onto the bottom of that. I don't want to roll that seam, so I'm going to go ahead and have this part on the bottom. We have some nice interlocking seams right there in the corners. I always like that. Okay. Pin, pin. Don't want that seam to roll, so we're going to press or pin that as well. Of course, the standard 1/4 inch seam, let's just go ahead and do that. Let's get that part done. So many threads. Oh, forgot a pin there. Okay, let's look and see how we did. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and, gosh, it sure wants to press downward. I'm trying to think if there's any reason to not do that. I don't think this part matters. This is your preference. I can see that part right there. Oh, it looks like they said to go ahead and press this way. Let's go ahead and go with those pressing instructions. Okay, that's ready to go. Now, again, this goes back to your the cutting diagram that we provided for you in your initial kit shipment. If you're cutting your blocks as you go, that's why it's so important that you cut that in this orientation so that your sides of your wreath have the wording going the proper direction. So we're at this stage. Let's see, where have we gone? We are now really at, let's see, that's side T. They just have it sideways. That always confuses me when it's this way, but yet it's displayed that way. So basically, we can turn our project again so that it's easier for us to acclimate to this and easier for us to understand that. So our words will be going this way. And we know that's the side. That's going to be trimmed away out there. We'll get both of those prepared. This one, get that ready. Then on this side, let's go to this side. We'll turn it this way. So we've got this side here. We'll grab another one of these. There. We know this is the side that's going to get cut away. Let's go sew those two, and those will be our sides. Okay, let's move that over. Let's turn that back so we're looking at true north. And we can start laying things out, seeing how we're doing. Are we on track? We're doing very well. And then the last piece, of course, is across the bottom here. So with that, we know we're going to be drawing that line, and this is the part cut away, right? And here, quick line, this is the part cut away. You know what's about to happen here. Corner clipper, corner clipper. And you can certainly do one at a time, or you can just trim them both. Because I've drawn the line and I scribbled on the part that I know is going to get cut away, I feel confident to go ahead and cut there. So I'm really only going to the sewing machine one time. Okay, let's press to the outside. We are so close. I think the little bit of extra effort we've had to put forth to have all the words going in the same direction is worth it, because this is a quilt that's going to be in our family for a very long time. And as you can imagine, right side together, I would go ahead and have this side on the bottom because I don't want to roll those seams. So same thing, go ahead and attach this. We'll go ahead and attach the bottom. I'm going to do that, and then I want to go ahead and talk about how to finish that center lane. And we are very close to actually finishing up our letter O. So I've sewn my wreath block together, and while I was there, I went ahead and just sewed the pink plaid off to the right side of that block, so it's ready to go. So looking at back at our pattern here at figure 10, we can see we have the wreath block on the bottom. We'll grab our piece K. Make sure you've got that right side up. It's so easy to, I just have to confirm with that one. That there, and then we have our pieced block, so that's going to have the plaid on that side and the gold on this side. Going ahead and sewing those together, and it looks like I went ahead and pressed, downward. Basically, you could press however you want to do that. You know what? That's a lot of. Let's press toward the white. I am solid on that decision. Here's why. There are so many points coming together here, right? The last thing I want is to push another seam on top of that. So that's why I went ahead and pressed toward the white. Once we do that, now we've got all three of our, what kind of I call columns, where we're able to sew this side to the middle and then sew this side to the middle. I want to look at one thing real quick. Let's make sure we've got some good interlocking seams. We said we're going to push this seam down, and that is why I pushed that seam up. That's correct. I remember this now. That's one of the other reasons I went ahead and went down with this one and up with this one is I didn't want to push any more bulk onto this block, so now I pushed down. This is why I went up on that one. So basically, let's sew these together, press toward the white, go ahead and sew the left to the middle and to the right. And once that's done, when I come back, we'll go finish our corners, and then we'll add our sashing to the bottom and top of our block. All right, I'll see you when I have that all put together. So I have my 3 columns sewn together, and now we are ready to put our corners on. So we'll grab our piece J, all of them, make sure they're right side up, of course, and you could just mark all of these at the same time. Move that to the side. And I'll just show you one, and then you're going to do the same exact process. That's the right side, so we'll flip it to the wrong side up. And let's draw our line exactly corner to corner. Okay. And as I said, go ahead and draw them all at the same time, just to save you some time to picking up and putting down that ruler. Now you can imagine that we're going to be, this will be here, this will be here, so just make sure that when you sew it on, it is in the proper orientation, so as we've done before. And this is why we couldn't sew these corners on before. Notice how that's going into the neighboring block. Go ahead and pin that in place. We're going to sew exactly on that sewn line. Confirm you love what you're seeing. You know, go ahead and roll that back once it's sewn. In fact, let's just go do that. Let's sew one of these on, and you're going to repeat the same steps on all 4 sides. You're getting very close to having your O block done and being halfway through our blocks. I'm going to pin down here too. Pin, pin, pin. Make sure I've got that right side up. I feel like, yep, I do. Sometimes the lights on the video make it a little more difficult for me to see. I think I have everything lined up just so. Let's go ahead and sew on our drawn line. Now the quilt, as it's the block, as it's growing, kind of drags. The weight wants to tip it off of my table. So I'm just going to kind of roll that up a little bit, make it a little bit easier for myself. So if you're working in limited space, that might be a helpful tip for you as well. Get that heating up. I know in the pattern it says trim and then flip. I like to check first before I do get happy with cutting, because that of course is, you can't come back from that one once it's cut. I always like to check and make sure I'm happy with those corners, and once you are, go ahead and press that. Now we can always come back. We'll grab our dash line along our 6.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. That's our 1/4 inch line. And I just lay that along my seam. And this is a great thing to add to your stash. You could do actually a lot with that fabric. And out to the side that goes. Trim that away. So let's just look at our project so far. So now we're beginning to shape that O. We're going to repeat those steps, one in every single corner. Again, being very careful to draw that straight line, pin, 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 check it, then trim it. And then in the very, very end of that, once all 4 corners are done, this is where our longer 2 strips will be coming into play, and those will be added to the top and bottom of our project. And so, of course, when you get ready to sew those on, again, you may be tempted to have that strip up on the top. Don't do it. You have a lot of seams here that could roll on you that are on the underside. Go ahead and pin that and sew it from this side. So let me go ahead. I'm going to finish my other 3 corners. I will go ahead and put that strip on, pinning it from this side and sewing it from this side. And when I come back, we should have a letter O. All right, I'll be right back. All right, so we have our corners on and we've sewn the top and bottom strip. Our letter O is done. And next week we're moving on to the letter E. You know, I hope you're having a great time. I love it when we can, you know, take all of those skills we've learned as quilters and they all come together to create something really beautiful. Again, if you haven't jumped into social media, jump into the fun. We have a Facebook group where you'll be able to just encourage others, be able to share your progress, maybe even help out someone that's asking questions. Maybe you have a tip or technique they would love to hear. So I'll see you next week when we jump in and we get to be able to make the letter E together. I'll see you then.